Good morning, students. Welcome to BPHES CSRD Institute of Social Work Research online classes on social work. Today our topic is method of social work with individuals and families, social casework. Unit 1 Introduction, Part 1 Concept, History and Values. Social casework is the first method of social work to be developed and practiced. Mary Richmond is the first author on this subject. In her book, Social Diagnosis, she has explained the concept of social casework. In social diagnosis, there is the attempt to arrive at as exact a definition as possible of the social situation and the personality of a given client. In the beginning of 20th century, working with individuals was more or less a psychological area. Psychodiagnosis was more popular, and even the social workers were more involved in psychological dimension, psychological diagnosis. Mary Richmond has brought a new concept called social diagnosis, where the focus is on the society, the social situation, the social background, the family background, the neighborhood that contribute towards the problems of the person. So blame is taken away from the individual and placed on the society. So in order to solve an individual problem, we need to diagnose the social situation. We need to understand, identify and analyze the various sociological factors, social circumstances that contribute to individual problems so that social workers can address them and solve them. Investigation or gathering of the evidence begins the process. The critical examination and comparison of the evidence follow it. And finally comes its interpretation and definition of the social difficulty. We'll find here she has redefined the individual problem. From the social diagnosis perspective, individual problems are considered as social difficulty. So it starts with fact finding or study, then diagnosis, analyzing the social facts, the evidences, finally interpreting the problem in terms of social factors, the social circumstances, the situational factors. While we identify them, it will be easy to solve the individual problems. Now, we have more popular and widely used definition given by Bowers in 1949. Social casework is an art in which knowledge of the science of human relations and skill in relationships are used to mobilize capacities in the individual and resources in the community appropriate for better adjustment between the client and all or any part of his total environment. Now, social casework is basically an art. Art is a creative activity. We know every person is unique. Every person has a unique environment. Even if several people have the same type of problem, they have developed in a unique environment. Each person requires a unique treatment. Therefore, it is an art. We can't have a universal solution, universal prescription for all the individual's problem. The casework focus on the art and science of human relation. Science of human relation means the psychological information, the scientific knowledge about human behavior. So it is an art in which the science of human behavior is combined with human relationship skills in relationships. The purpose is to mobilize the individual capacities, to empower the human person, to mobilize his resources available in the community. So at one hand, we empower the person, we mobilize the individual capacities. On the other hand, we mobilize the community. The purpose is to bring a better adjustment between individual and the environment. So this is very comprehensive definition of casework. Now, later on, Helen Harris Perlman, 1957, has given another definition which is now widely used by social workers and students across the world. Social casework is a process used by certain human welfare agencies to help individuals to cope more effectively with their problems in social functioning. In her book on social casework, a problem-solving process, she has given this definition. Here she has very much focused on the problem-solving dimension of social casework. You have seen the previous definition. It was towards attaining better adjustment with the environment. Here we focus on problem-solving capacity of the individual. So casework is a helping process, helping individual to cope more effectively with their problems in social functioning. Means to empower the individual to improve their problem-solving skills and capacity. Now, the next topic is the historical background of social casework. Social casework is of recent origin. It has almost 100 years or 150 years of history. Now, in order to understand the historical background of social casework, we need to understand the social, economic, and political condition of 18th century. So I am not going to explain the industrialization, the modernization, renaissance that took place in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century that has changed the traditional agricultural society into modern industrialized society, which witnessed large number of rural-urban migration. People started flocking into the cities. They started living in slums, and their social problems emerged. There were a lot of poor people in the cities, and in those days, in England, there were churches, parishes, which organized workhouses to accommodate poor people. where these people were given some kind of food for work. There were also outdoor relief. Some kind-hearted, compassionate people visited the rural household, the urban poor household, and extended the relief to them. This is called outdoor relief. Both these institutions, both these systems were what merged in 18th century in about 15,000 parishes by an act of the parliament in 1722. Now, in 1785, Strangers' Friends Society started. Another such society started in 1789 at Liverpool. These friendly societies were the first social work enterprises which engaged friendly visitors, social work volunteers, kind-hearted, compassionate volunteers who would reach out to the poor people, give them counseling, give them the relief. There were such 9,672 friendly societies in 1803. In 1869, Society for Organizing Charitable Relief and Repressing Mendicity came into being. This was an organization of all such friendly societies, and it was renamed as Charity Organization Society. Charity Organization Society, which was a collaboration, an organization of all the charity societies, friendly societies. Their purpose was organization and cooperation in charity, help for deserving cases, help to be sufficient to promote regeneration or empowerment, self-help. In 1869, Charity Organization Society in London appointed friendly visitors, the forerunners of social case workers. They visited poor families, especially in the urban sector, to assess their need, provide the financial help and other help, give them guidance and advice. Simultaneously, Toynbee Hall, another movement started in London that is called Settlement House movement. Charity organization was based on the philosophy of individual assistance reaching out to the household, while Settlement House pooled the poor people in community centers. And the social workers reached to them in a sheltered environment where poor people were gathered, they were given training, help, and this is called Settlement House. It was founded by Canon Samuel Barnett and Henrietta in 1884. This is the Toynbee Hall. It's a large house which has provision for accommodation, education, vocational training, etc. Now, another historical moment in the development of social case work was engagement of almoners. Almoners is an officer responsible for distributing alms to the poor, usually connected with a religious house or other institution, but also a position with some governments. Almoners were basically community health workers. They reached to the sick people and gave them help. In 1890s, almoners were appointed by hospitals at the instance of Sir Charles Stuart Locke in England, the secretary to the Council of London Charity Organization. So they were the predecessors of hospital social workers who visited the patient's house to assess their ability to pay, prepare family history of the patients, to assist the physicians, help the treatment, and refer to the providence and rehabilitation of the patients. Some patients were very poor, they were unable to pay for their treatment. Such people were referred to the Royal Providence, which means government assistance, grants. So in modern times, the term almoner has also been used in Britain for a trained social worker, usually a woman qualified to work in the medical setting. In this sense, almoner was succeeded in 1964 by the title medical social worker. Medical social workers are employed by hospitals and public health departments. So we will see case workers are mainly engaged in the medical setting in the West. Now, social case work in the USA. As I have mentioned earlier, by the end of 18th century, a tremendous entry of immigrants contributed to the explosive growth of the cities where the factories engaged in large-scale production of goods. People started migrating and they were settling in the cities. So these are some pictures which symbolizes the industrial development of the USA in 18th centuries. So many people started crowding in the cities, far away from their ancestral lands and extended families, working in factories for low wages, and the social need, the social problems, the poverty increased. So, in the similar line as it was in London, there was two systems emerged in the US, the charity organization society and the settlement house movements. This is the friendly visitor visiting the household and extending the help. This is typically of settlement house movement where poor people were gathered at a particular house and they were given training. So charity organization society movement was introduced by Reverend Stephen Humphrey Gurteen and T. Guilford Smith, a young successful businessman and a parishioner at St. Mary's Church. Reverend Gurteen traveled to England and spent the summer of 1877 learning about London charity organization. He learned how this charity organization was functioning in London, and similar one was established in the USA. The first COS was established in Buffalo, New York in 1877. The goal was to discover what caused poverty among individuals and eliminate the causes and thereby get rid society of poverty. The focus of charity organization was individual and reflected the belief that poverty was a character defect. Friendly visitors were the volunteers, later on became the paid professionals trained to guide people to change behavior that contributed to poverty and become productive. So friendly visitors, as I mentioned earlier, were originally the case workers who visited individuals and helped them to solve their problem. So Mary Richmond, the first, we can say the professional social case worker. She was born in Belleville, Illinois. A few years later, after the death of her parents, she was sent to live with her grandmother and aunts in Baltimore, Maryland. Her grandmother, an active woman activist, was known as a spiritualist and a radical. This is a little brief biographical sketch of Mary Richmond. She began her career as a friendly visitor in Baltimore in 1888. She grew as a great professional, and her tremendous work contributed to the establishment of the first school of social work, the New York School of Applied Philanthropy in 1898, later on became Columbia University School of Social Work. You see, at one hand, the first School of Philanthropy, the present Columbia School of Social Work, at the right side. In 1891, Richmond was elected as the General Secretary of the COS in Baltimore. Later on, she became the Director of the Charity Organization Department of the Russell Sage Foundation in 1909. She concentrated on the community as being a resource for any needy person or family, quite revolutionary for the time, which blamed the person for their problems. Now, she brought a new idea. Individual is not to be blamed, but the social circumstances, the situation, the family background, the social diagnosis in place of psychological diagnosis. Now, this is Mary Richmond, and all her ideas were materialized in the form of a book, Social Diagnosis, in 1917. This was the first social case or practice book to present the professional ways to identify client's problem. Now, the another movement, that is settlement movement in the US. The settlement movement was based on the belief that in order to help the poor people, workers had to live within the community and provide services from their dwelling or the settlement. The individual well-being is directly related to the external surrounding. This is the philosophy of the settlement movement. Settlement workers focused on changing the environment by advocating for better neighborhood services, public health program, and employment condition. Most of the settlement houses are located in poor neighborhood and involved in helping immigrants to get adjusted to life in the United States. So, settlement house movement in US is coined with another great social worker, Jane Addams. She was born on September 6 in 1860 in Carterville, Illinois. Jane Addams co-founded one of the first settlements in United States, the Hull House in Chicago, Illinois, in 1889. She was named a co-winner of the 1931 Nobel Peace Prize. So this is the Hull House, and she is Jane Addams. Her father was a state senator and a businessman, and Addams lived a life of privilege. Her father had many important friends, including President Abraham Lincoln. She was a highly influential person. On one trip to friend Ellen Gates Starr, the 27-year-old Addams visited the famed Toynbee Hall and founded by Canon Samuel Barnett and Henriette in 1884 in London, a special facility established to help the poor. She visited the London settlement house before she started the Hull House in the USA. They opened the neighborhood guild settlement in New York City after learning the lessons from the London Toynbee Hall. The second settlement house, the Hull House, was opened in Chicago in 1889. Hull House was directed by Jane Addams. Hull House, which was named after the building's original owner, provided services to the immigrant and the poor population living in Chicago area. Over the 10 years, the organization grew to include 10 buildings, which extended services that included childcare, educational courses, an art gallery, a public kitchen, and several other social programs. Addams served as the first female president of the National Conference of Social Work, established the National Federation of Settlement, and served as president of the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. She died in 1935 in Chicago. So what is the difference between settlement house and charity organization societies? The settlement house, the settlement movement defined problems as environmentally and engaged in social improvement. Charity organization society, for the most part, define problems as personal deficiencies and emphasize the need for moral uplift to achieve social betterment. It was Mary Richmond who brought a reconciliation of these two approaches by the classical text on social casework, the social diagnosis, in 1917. Now a little bit about the history and development of social casework in India. N.M. Joshi, one of the founders of the trade union movement in India, had established in 1911 an organization called the Social Service League in Mumbai. Social Service League conducted training programs for volunteers, whose services were later utilized for relief work among the people suffering from famines, epidemics, floods, and such other disasters, and also for welfare programs among the poor and the destitute. These volunteers can be called the forerunners of social case workers in India. As everyone knows, in 1936, training in social work at Sir Dorabji Tata School, Graduate School of Social Work, as a generalist practice which included casework and case management, started. In 1946, training in social casework as a separate specialization started. And Grace Matthew, by her book An Introduction to Social Casework, became the pioneer in social casework profession in India. Now, in her book, she has given the values of social casework. What are values? Philosophical values constitute the core beliefs for social work. These values add motivation for their social work. Without these values, people pursue MSW just for getting a postgraduate degree rather than a desire to help people. Non-acceptance of these values is untenable, and social work career is not meant for them. Now, what are the values? There are basically 5 values explained by Grace Matthew. We are following these values even today. Every human being has to be considered as a person with dignity and worth. What is the most valuable thing in the world? That is human person. Whether he is rich or poor, whether he is sick or healthy, aged or young, even an unborn person is so precious. There is nothing more valuable than human being in this world. This is the first value of social work, especially social case work. Second value, human beings are interdependent. The condition of interdependence indicates that there is a right duty matrix which governs human interactions in social group. You know, human beings cannot survive alone. They're always interconnected. There is a collective existence for human beings. No human beings can survive alone. Some animals are born with such a survival capacity. When that is born, it becomes independent. It does not depend upon anybody. But human beings, for the first 5 years, is so much dependent on mother or the parents. For about 10, 15 or up to 18 years legally, the child is dependent on adults. Children grow always under adult supervision up to the age of 18, which shows that human beings are so much interdependent. This phenomenon of interdependence is the second value of casework. Third one, there are common human needs that need to be met for growth and development of individuals. The existence of common needs does not negate the uniqueness of individuals. Every individual is like all other human beings in some aspects, like some other human beings in some other aspects, and like no other human beings in certain other aspects. Which means there is some uniqueness, at the same time there is some common needs. The physiological needs, the basic needs, the safety, security needs, the need for social belongingness, the esteem needs, these needs were explained by Abraham Maslow, great psychologist. These are common needs. At the same time, person have got a need for self-fulfillment, self-expression, self-reliance. We can say self-actualization, self-realization. This is the unique need. Even there are common needs, there is unique way of meeting these needs, satisfying these needs. Therefore, common needs and individual uniqueness together make the third value for social casework. The fourth value, every individual has within him and her the potential for growth and achievement, and she has a right to the realization of this potential. From this perspective, it follows that people have the capacity to change. Social workers believe that every person has the potentiality for self-development. They require a positive regard, an encouraging environment so that the person can flourish himself. And social workers never blame human beings, believe that they can change. Even a hardcore criminal has the capacity to change. Human nature is never unchangeable. Social workers never believe that human beings are unchangeable. There is no fixed nature for human beings. He may be wrong or he has become criminal because of his social background, because of unique way of his upbringing, because of his circumstances. Giving him a better circumstances, giving him a better surrounding, situation, opportunity to grow, he will change. She will change. He can contribute to the society. That's why casework has this basic belief. Nobody is unchangeable. People can change for the better. Everyone can develop his capacity and contribute to the society. This is the fourth value of social casework. Finally, society has an obligation to help those who do not have the means for the realization of their potentials. So this indicates the government's responsibility, the responsibility of the civil societies to engage social workers, to help the poor, help the downtrodden, help the marginalized, to help them to solve their problem, to help them to mainstream them to the society. There is a social obligation. This is the fifth value of social work. So with this, we conclude the first lecture, and in the next lecture, we will learn the values and the components of social casework. So in this lecture, we have learned the concept, the meaning, the definition of social casework. We have learned the historical development of social casework in England, in the USA, and in India. Finally, we have learned the values of social casework. Social casework, वैयक्तिक कार्य, व्यक्ति कार्य, ये क्या है? व्यक्ति कार्य और व्यक्ति सहकार्य म्हणजे मदद करना, व्यक्ति को मदद करना, जो व्यक्ति के साथ जो समस्या है उसको समझने का कोशिश करना, वो व्यक्ति को वो समस्या छोड़ने के लिए, सॉल्व करने के लिए, निभाने के लिए मदद करना, ये व्यक्ति सहकार्य है. समाज कार्य का पहला पद्धति व्यक्ति सहकार्य है. व्यक्ति सहकार्य अमेरिका में, इंग्लैंड में, 100 साल पहले शुरू हो गया था। इंडिया में अभी 75 साल हो गया। ये सोशल वर्कर का सबसे पहला मेथोडोलॉजी पद्धति है। ये प्रैक्टिस करने के लिए उनके पास जो मूल्य होता है, ग्रेस मैथ्यू उनका जो किताब है इंट्रोडक्शन टू सोशल केस वर्क, उसमें उन्होंने 5 वैल्यूज दिया है, मूल्य दिया है। ये व्यक्ति सहकार्य, ये मूल्य में आधार पर प्रैक्टिस करना है। ये मूल्य क्या है? सबसे पहला मूल्य है मनुष्य, व्यक्ति सबसे महत्वपूर्ण है। दुनिया में ह्यूमन बीइंग्स के अलावा कोई भी वैल्यूबल चीज नहीं है। सबसे वैल्यूबल चीज ह्यूमन बीइंग्स है। ये ह्यूमन बीइंग्स, मनुष्य, मानविकता सबसे महत्वपूर्ण है। वो यूनिक है। वो यूनिकनेस, वैयक्तिकरण, ह्यूमन बीइंग्स एक दूसरों से अलग है। उसका समस्या अलग है। उसको हमें समझ में आना चाहिए, उसका इंडिविजुअल अटेंशन देना चाहिए। फिर उसको सॉल्व करने के लिए एक वैयक्तिक पद्धति होता है। हर व्यक्ति के साथ हम वैयक्तिक पद्धति से हम उसको सॉल्व करना है। तीसरा है इंडिविजुअल यूनिकनेस एंड कॉमन नीड। समुदाय में कुछ चीजें है, गरज है, सभी के लिए होता है, लेकिन ये गरज निभाने का तरीका है वो यूनिक होता है। इसलिए इंडिविजुअल को हम यूनिवर्सल तरीका से ट्रीट नहीं कर सकते। हम हर व्यक्ति को इंडिविजुअली हमें उसको बात करना है, उसके साथ मुलाकात करना है, उसका प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व करना है। और फोर्थ वैल्यू, इंडिविजुअल हैज ए पोटेंशियलिटी। सबके साथ अंदर जो कैपेसिटी है सेल्फ रिलायंस के लिए, अपना विकास के लिए, सबके अंदर क्षमता होता है। सोशल केस वर्कर को ये क्षमता को आइडेंटिफाई करना है, उसको बढ़ावा देना है, उसको एनकरेज करना है। फिर वो व्यक्ति अपने कैपेसिटी, अपने पर्सनालिटी, अपने तरीका से वो डेवलप कर सकते हैं। उसी में और एक मूल्य है ह्यूमन पर्सन कैन चेंज। उनका जो नेचर है, उनका जो क्या है, उनका जो नेचर फिक्स नहीं होता है। कोई भी क्रिमिनल होता है, गुनहगारी होता है, उसको बदला हो सकता है। कोई भी नोबडी इज बॉर्न क्रिमिनल। ऐसा कोई भी जन्म से ऐसा गुनहगारी नहीं होता है। उसका फैमिली का वातावरण के वजह से ऐसा सिचुएशन में आया होगा। उसको समझ में आना चाहिए, उसको ऐसा बढ़ावा देना है। वो पर्सन कैन चेंज। उसका जिंदगी खुद बदल हो सकता है। किसी का भी जिंदगी फिक्स नहीं होता है, उसका बदलाव हो सकते हैं। बदलाव लाने का काम सोशल वर्कर करते हैं, व्यक्ति सहकार्यकर्ता करते हैं। समाज कार्यकर्ता का रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, जिम्मेदारी है। फाइनली समाज का जिम्मेदारी है सोशल वर्क। ये जैसे इंडिविजुअल को, व्यक्ति को मदद करना समाज का एक रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होता है। ये है आज का लेसन। हम अभी अगला लेक्चर में सुनेंगे सोशल वर्क का कंपोनेंट, विविध घटक। हम इसको अगले लेक्चर में सुनेंगे। विश यू ऑल द बेस्ट। थैंक यू।